Hey, welcome to my review of Rolling Gunner, both the PC version and the Switch version. You're getting a 2-for-1 today because there's really not a reason to separate out the reviews. There's not that many differences or reasons to do that. Before I get into talking about Rolling Gunner itself, I want to begin by talking about its releases, its availability, and stuff like that. Kind of open that can of worms, and then I'll get into the gameplay and stuff as it gets more exciting as we get further in the replay. And so the main replay you're seeing, the larger one, that is what I did on PC because I have a decent way to control PC shmups. Whereas on the Switch, I don't really have a good way. I have an arcade stick that I use for lag testing, but it's not well set up by any means for like long-term play, and it's kind of a pain in the butt to get out and use and everything, so I didn't feel like doing that. So the smaller replay you see is the version I did on Switch, but in handheld mode. So all the gameplay was done in handheld mode, and then I'm just playing back the replay. For fun, I'll throw in some on-cam footage for on-screen footage for the beginning, but the Switch kept trying to dim itself and stuff, so it turned into a pain. So I switched over to direct capture for the smaller one there. So I can't remember how long ago was that Rolling Gunner came out, but it's almost a year or so, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. It really doesn't matter that much. But it's been out for a while is what I'm getting at. And up until this point, the only way to get it was to order the physical DVD from Japan, which is what I did. And I think that's a mistake, and I kind of want to talk about that a little bit before getting into the technical aspects of things. So in my opinion, I feel like shmups are an instant gratification genre in that is what they're good at and that's what they should capitalize on. So the problem with having it be physical release only from Japan is that someone sees it, says, wow, that looks really cool, I want to play that now. And then they find out, oh, I have to go into this kind of poorly set up Japanese shop and try and figure out how to buy it, and then wait a month and a half for it to show up. I think that's just why not too many people have this game or have played it up to this point, just because of that barrier. And I do understand that Steam's kind of a shitty place in some ways when it comes to indie games and stuff like that, because, you know, I believe they take a good amount of money out of your sales, and it's a pain in the ass to set up for a Japanese developer, I'm sure. But at this point I'm thinking, since the DVD itself has no sort of DRM protection at all, no piracy protection at all, and the shmup community is generally really supportive of their games and everything, I feel like they should just set up even some kind of bootleg digital download service where, I don't know, you pay for it through PayPal and they just send you the link or whatever, like a Bandcamp style thing. I think that would have been better because I think that's what's really prevented people from digging into this game. So if they didn't want to go the Steam route, I still feel like, because there's no piracy protection on the DVD anyway, might as well do the download link, because if someone's going to pirate the game, you know, that's not going to stop them. So that's my opinion there. And the reason why I say that is because I think this eshop version of Rolling Gunner will end up being the most popular and most played version simply due to availability, if not anything else. And the Switch is a popular platform. So I think I'll start out by talking about the differences between the two versions. As you can see, visually there's very little difference. Both are captured in 720p. They both seem to play in 1080p just fine. This is by no means a visually demanding game at all. I mean, look at the backgrounds, they are static images that are just scrolling by. There's no kind of processing to be done, and the foreground graphics and stuff aren't that intense either. By the way, this shot where it comes in and it like pans across those mountains back there, that always reminds me of Idaho. See those mountains back there? That's how Idaho looks, for people wondering. And sometimes I'm like, whoa, is this of Idaho? But no, it's of Japan, I think. But that's what Idaho looks like. There's just mountains just like that in the background of everything. Everywhere you look, there's mountains. Anyway, So visually it plays really well. Input lag wise, I didn't feel like doing an input lag test for this, like a formal one, just because my setup's kind of put away for a while. I'll get to it at some point. And so I just kind of went based on feel, comparing it to the PC version and then comparing it to other games on the Switch. And I have to say, the Switch version of this game is very responsive, especially for a Switch game. I wouldn't say it's as responsive as the PC version, just because on PC you can disable VSync, which essentially always cuts out a frame. But other than that, I don't think there's any extra lag. So I'd say there's one more frame of lag over the PC version. Both feel very snappy and responsive. Ballpark guess, I would say that the Switch version is 3 frames of lag, and the PC version with VSync off is 2 frames. That's a very safe guess, and really, when it comes to PC releases, 2 frames is just usually what you get. I haven't encountered a 1 frame PC release up to this point. And yeah, it feels extremely responsive on both platforms. So overall, if the Nintendo Switch platform is the only way you can get this game, or only way you feel inclined to get it, I think it's a really solid release. The only issue is not really with the game itself, but with the Switch itself, as far as finding a low latency way to control this thing. Because unless you guys haven't heard, you might not have. Some people know about this, some people don't. The Switch in docked mode has extra latency over when it's in handheld mode, because the dock itself adds lag. I've tested this a lot of times. It's fact. The dock adds lag. I'm assuming because the USB ports on it aren't super fast, and you essentially have to go from your arcade stick or controller into the USB port, into the other USB port, into the USB-C port, and then to the Switch. So there's an extra step there that other consoles don't have, because other consoles just go, directly to the console, but the dock is essentially a hub, so it adds some lag there. And it's about a frame, I would say, or about half a frame, depending on what stick you're using and all that kind of stuff. And then if you're using a Brooks converter on top of that, yeah, you're working with a lot of extra lag there. And you could say, oh, a frame and a half, that's not that much extra lag. But when the game only has 2 frames of lag, 2.5 to 3 frames of lag, you're essentially doubling it on your controller, which is pretty absurd. So the fastest way and the most responsive way to play these games on Switch is actually in handheld mode. But handheld mode comes with its own challenges, namely the screen size and trying to decipher the bullets, especially in the later stages, or if you don't feel like playing in handheld mode. The other option you have that I'm aware of that's responsive is the wireless Pro Controller, so playing the Pro Controller in wireless mode. But in my opinion, the Pro Controller has a pretty substandard D-pad. It's not that good, to be honest. And then if you're a stick player, you're kind of like, eh. So then you have to end up modding the USB Pro Controller, which is a pain in the butt, and that's what I do. So there's just not a lot of good solutions right now as far as playing this with low latency on the Switch. I mean, it's playable, I'm not saying it's not playable, but it's not ideal. So that's something I'm going to start looking into more, see if I can come up with something. Other than that though, playing this on the Switch, especially in handheld mode, as far as latency, is very responsive. I was really impressed there. I didn't see any additional slowdown that the game itself doesn't introduce in PC mode, so rock solid performance overall. I didn't play on expert mode, so maybe on expert mode is when shit starts to get crazy, but for the vast majority of the user base out there, the handheld version, the Switch version, is rock solid as far as performance. So now let's talk about Rolling Gunner itself. What an interesting game. One thing that really struck me when I first played Rolling Gunner is the screen size of this bad boy. Rolling Gunner is a 16 by 9 shmup with small sprites, so you've got a lot of screen real estate going on there, way more than your traditional cave shmup. And interestingly, I think the game does make good use of the screen, because especially in the later stages, you're essentially being attacked on all sides. That's what really separates Rolling Gunner from most other horizontal shmups is, yeah, in Death Smiles you can get kind of attacked from the left and the right and then flanked up and down from time to time. But Rolling Gunner, you are literally being attacked from all four sides in the later stages at once, so it's pretty crazy. I think it's a really clever bit of game design as far as, making that happen because of the way the rolling gun works. I have more comments and criticisms and ideas about the rolling gun itself, which I'll get to in a little bit, especially in the later stages. But for now, I'll talk about the overall game design is really well done. It feels like a successor to a cave-style shmup, but in a good way. It doesn't feel like it's, one of those kind of crappy Dojin imitations. It feels legitimately well designed. The stages, the bullet patterns, the bosses. You could tell a lot of really hard work went into putting this game together. So I consider it, a top quality indie shmup release. And I know the really, really highly skilled players at the genre, like Bananamatic and Jamers, really like this game. And I think it's a nice breath of air for them because it's, a unique challenge you don't usually run up against because of the way the game is designed, the levels are designed. So speaking of top level challenge, one thing I need to point out to people who especially aren't super familiar with Dojin shmups, indie shmups, Bullet Hell, Danmaku, like that whole scene, is these games are brutal. They are very, very difficult. And when people say, oh, shmups are difficult, that's just kind of a thing. Shmups are difficult. But I'm saying relative to its peers, Rolling Gunner is really hard. It is much harder than stuff like the Steam Cave releases, just on normal difficulty. I think it's even harder than Crimson Clover on normal difficulty. This thing is a beast. Part of it is due to the control scheme, which I'll talk about a bit later, but other part is just unrelenting bullet patterns. And like I said, since the screen is so big, and yet the enemy sprites are normal size, it's just a lot of screen real estate and a lot of enemies attacking you, flanking you. So you'll see here that the difficulty I'm playing on is casual mode, and I think you should put casual mode in air quotes there, because that's kind of like playing novice mode in SDOJ, where sure, it's easier than arcade mode or whatever, normal mode in this game, whatever it's called, but goddamn, it's still really challenging. And it kind of lures you into thinking, oh, it's not that hard, especially in these early stages here. It doesn't look that bad. But stage 4 onward, the game really ramps up. And this is one of those games where I was playing on normal difficulty and I was just getting absolutely whipped. Because on normal difficulty, it's not that much different than casual. It is and it isn't. It is because your auto bombs, if you get hit, you lose all your bombs rather than one, so that's a huge difference right there. But the bullet patterns themselves, yes, they are thicker and faster, and they are a little bit different. But casual mode isn't completely nerfed. It's not one of those super easy modes where you can just twiddle your thumbs and get through. It's decently challenging. So I think that's cool. So what I'm saying is, when you guys get this game, if you're not, hardcore into the genre or played a lot of bullet hell style shmups, I actually would not recommend going into arcade mode. I would say play novice mode, and if you can get through that pretty fairly, pretty well, then switch over to casual mode and then just kind of work your way up. If you're a beast, do whatever you want, but I'm just saying, the reason I bring this up is because I think shmups have this problem with localization, where someone needs to tell these shmup developers, okay, your casual mode is not for casuals, it's for casual super players, but it's not for actual casuals, so you need to rename it to something a little less degrading, like Arrange E, or you know what I mean, or normal mode. Make casual mode normal mode, and then make your arcade mode hard mode, and then make your expert mode ultra hard or whatever. I think that would be better. I mean, it's not like there's really nothing to lose. The super players, I guess, might be slightly annoyed, but I don't see why. I think that would be better, because the problem is when you bring someone new into this game who, let's say they're a pretty decent gamer overall, they play difficult games, but they're not, really into the genre, they're still going to feel degraded playing a mode called casual mode, even though the difficulty is freaking ridiculous. So that's just something to keep in mind, is don't feel bad about playing the lower difficulty modes in this game, because it's hardcore. And so one reason I'll get into that I think the game is extra challenging is because not only is Rolling Gunner throwing pretty dense and complex patterns, these aren't too bad. Like, the first 3 stages aren't really that bad. It's 4 onward where it starts to get crazy. Anyway, it's throwing decently complex patterns at you in casual mode, but what makes the game even more challenging is managing your gun, because it's like a skill unto itself, almost equally as challenging as navigating your ship and doing your usual shmup dodging and all that, because the gun has very technical execution to get it to where you want it to go and to control it. Because the way it works is pretty simple. When you're not using your focus shot, like I am right here, and the gun's not really a big deal in boss fights, it's usually in the stages this becomes a problem. When you're not using your focus shot, your gun is in a free rotation that goes around you, and it's not stuck to, I thought for a while it would be stuck to 8 cardinal points, like a stop sign, 8 cardinal points, but it is not. It has some funny acute angles and stuff that you have to work with. And so the cool part about that is, yes, you can get really unique and funky angles, which can be beneficial, but the problem with it is a lot of the times, if your angles are just slightly off to where you want them to be, you're dead. Because fine adjustment of the gun is not easy. It's not easy to just move it a few degrees when it's in full rotation mode. So basically what I'm saying is, not only are you having to make precise dodges, you have to make precise gun locks. If you miss your gun lock, which happens in a few times in the stage, you start to get in really ugly situations really quick. And it's really hard to reset your gun, because your gun's movement is tied to your movement. So you can't independently rotate it to just quickly adjust it. You have to move, and sometimes that makes you move into some pretty unfavorable situations. So essentially, this can all be solved by memorizing the stages really well and really hammering down your route. But I'm just saying, it basically adds another layer of routing, where you're not only having to routing where your ship goes, but you need to route out your gun rotations really precisely. So I think that's cool, but I'm just saying that adds a layer of difficulty on top of the usual bullet hell difficulty. I will say that I do think I'm kind of divided on how I feel about the way the gun works, because in some ways I really appreciate the amount of skill that's involved in handling this gun. It really is like an art form at times. It's so technical and challenging, but also rewarding if you get it right. My issue... Oh, I hate that. It spawned on top of me. My issue with it, though, is there's some times where I know what I want to do, and I'm executing, but the control scheme is not working with me. For instance, I would like to see at least an option to try it. Is a button to lock your gun when it's in free range mode. So when it's unlocked, when it's not using focus, when it's having the spread shot. I would love to see an option to lock it then. Like right here, here's a good example. Like, I want to move a direction and shoot this other direction, but the two cannot get along. Where I need to go and where my gun needs to go cannot get along in that situation. So, if you could just lock it, that would be a lot better. My only wonder is if he tried that and it was just too OP, it was just too good for the stage design to handle. I don't know. That's why I'm saying I'm kind of divided. It could work a lot better and make the game more fun, because you're not constantly battling, trying to aim your gun in the more hectic stages. But it also could be just too powerful. So here's another example here where, see what I want to do and what the gun wants to do, we're not getting along there. But I think the worst part is that when you get in really heavy scramble situations, I play, just commenting on the replay real quick, I play like crap the first 3 stages of this replay, but hang in there. I start playing well as the replay goes on. From right about here onward, I start playing well. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the gun. I'm gonna play this game more because I really enjoy this game a lot. I love how immediate it is. Love how hectic it is. Those are kind of my favorite styles of shmups, or bullet hell style shmups that are hectic, fast, and just basically show no mercy, essentially. And again, it's responsive. The hitboxes are clean, well executed. The bullet patterns are clever. The slowdown works nicely and is predictable. It's very well designed, that's for sure. So as I play it more, I'll kind of come back to my thoughts on whether or not I think the gun movement mechanic is still a little too janky, or if it does serve the gameplay. I'm not totally made up on my mind on that. And I think that would only come with a lot of hours playing this game, especially in the higher difficulties, because that's when this issue shines. If you're playing in novice mode or even most of casual mode, it's really not that much of an issue. But I was playing in original mode and it starts to get pretty filthy with the amount of enemies it's throwing at you, and you just can't get the gun to move where you need it to move in relation to your movement. So let's talk about the mechanics of Rolling Gunner that I'm aware of anyway. There could be some more high level, meta mechanics and stuff like that that I don't use. But the way it works is really fun. So there's a hypering mechanic. Well, obviously there's the rolling gun. I've kind of explained how that works. But in addition to that, and almost just as important, is the hypering mechanic. And what's fun is the hyper mechanic basically works really similarly to the way Death Smiles works, where, especially on bosses and larger enemies, when you point blank them with the focus shot, you get more of those metal things there, and those build up your hyper, and then you can hyper, and when you're hypering you get even more points. So it's basically a nice feedback loop of play aggressively by point blanking stuff to build up your hyper. Then you hyper stuff aggressively to build up your score, which gives you extends, and then you can use your built up score to gain more hyper, and then so on and so forth. So it's a nice loop there, and it works really well. And it's kind of like Crimson Clover in a lot of ways, where playing aggressively and getting hypers actually helps your survival a lot, because the game is designed for you to be using a lot of hypers. And I don't believe there's a rank system, not that I'm aware of. There could be, but it's a Doujin shmup written in Japanese, so I have no idea what the manual says about any of that stuff. But just from my experience, it didn't feel like there was any sort of rank system that I could find. Maybe there is, but it didn't seem noticeable to me. But maybe rank kicks in later on as you go? I don't think so. From what I can tell, I don't think there's a rank system. If it is, it's pretty subtle. Yeah, this game has a lot in common with the later cave shmups like DFK, or even SDOJ, where bullet canceling large enemies is a pretty big deal and pretty important. Like, it's one of the staples of the stage design is you're going for a lot of bullet cancels. Another interesting thing about this game is maybe this is a horizontal shmup thing, but it's 6 stages, not 5, so it has an extra stage for you. And yeah, so it's kind of a longer shmup, which I think is a good thing. Maybe. I don't know. Again, that's something I'm kind of divided on, but all the stages are good, so in that regard, it doesn't overstay its welcome. I think Kakai Katana is similar in length, and I feel like that game's a little long. It goes on a little too long. I feel that way. So I actually discovered a fun mechanic right at the end of this run. I didn't realize it beforehand, but when you're hypering, like I am here, let's say it throws a bullet pattern at me that I know I can't handle, you can actually press hyper again or bomb, same button, and it will bullet cancel everything and cancel out your hyper, but it won't use a bomb. So that's really helpful. Because what I was running into is sometimes I'd be hypering and I'd notice, okay, I need to bomb, but I don't want to just waste my hyper or waste my bomb. But now after I learned that, I think that helped me a lot with my survival, especially in the later boss fights. See, okay, here's when casual mode starts to really get after you and play much more challenging than what you'd expect out of a casual mode. Right here, yeah, perfect. See, I would have used it had I been aware of that mechanic existing at this point in the run. The bullet patterns in this game are really interesting. Like I said earlier, I think they mostly resemble a later cave shmup like DFK or SDOJ. A little less, basically a little more Toho-like than something you'd run into in the earlier cave games, where a lot of the bullet patterns are thicker and slower moving. But they still have those cave elements of kind of being aimed and mixing you up and keeping you on your toes. They're not very static or anything. So this section, I'm glad I did a few runs beforehand, because these lasers here, if you don't know about them, they will destroy you. They will kill you very, very quickly. So the way this section works is really interesting, where you have to battle all these guns and enemies flanking you, but then you have to be aware of these laser gates. You have to destroy them. If you don't, you're dead, or you lose a bomb. So it's kind of a push and pull, and then obviously if you're not killing the enemies fast enough, you get in situations like that. Just kind of watching the replay for a sec. I don't know what happened there. I don't know why because I went to bomb, I think, and I didn't have a bomb or a hyper, so I just died. I didn't try to dodge when I could have. So I guess I should also talk about the graphics of the game, right? I think the graphics are really interesting, where they're definitely not quite as polished as something like a Cave Shmup or Crimson Clover, as far as the way they're kind of fit together. The individual sprites and the individual backgrounds and everything themselves actually look well done. It's just they don't really mesh together very well. Like, you can tell the way the background's drawn and the way it moves, it's totally just a still image in the background. And then the way the enemies are just kind of plopped on top of things, or just the way the ships move in the air. It feels a little Uncanny Valley, it feels a little collage-like, but it's also kind of charming, so it's not a big deal. And at the end of the day, they still look great. So like I said, if this was something out of like Cave or a larger studio, I think that's something they'd have to go back and improve on. But considering this is an indie dev, And compared to a lot of the graphics of other indie devs, I think this is pretty well done graphically. It just kind of has a unique quirk and charm. And there are other indie shmups that kind of do the same thing. The game does look noticeably better in 1080p than it does in 720p, so that's good. It does have, resolution to the imagery. See, right there is where I used the hyper bomb cancel. I'm really proud of this boss fight, so I'm probably not going to say a lot here because I felt like I wanted to clear this boss. I wanted to get the clear, so I was saying, okay, I can't mess around because the last few patterns will eat up all my resources. So I've got to play really well in these parts. And some of these patterns start to get pretty crazy. And look how much health this guy has. He has so much health. It just goes on and on. This pattern I was really proud of. Made it through. I was fooling myself after that. It was just kind of a moment where I felt like all my hours grinding these games are starting to pay off a little bit, where I'm starting to look more and more like a legit player, I guess you could say, dodging the more complicated patterns. I get completely wrecked by those lasers after all that, but like I said, I didn't really understand how those lasers work very well, and so I was just trying my best there. This pattern is brutal. I actually had a run earlier where I could have cleared him just by bombing, because the bombs are really powerful, but I was stubborn and didn't bomb and ended up not beating him, so this time I told myself, okay, just bomb him. No need to be too prideful about it. And that's it. Oh, no, that's not it. You thought it was over, didn't you? I thought it was over. I was standing up, I was ready to be done, and bam! TLB. So I learned an interesting fun fact I'll share with you guys. So this convention of the TLB being a crystal or like a rock or whatever, a diamond, or just some like random shape, that actually comes from an interesting source that I didn't even realize till doing some research. So it comes from Dodonpachi, which if you guys don't know is one of my favorite shmups. I play that all the time. It was actually implemented in Dodonpachi because originally the Big B boss was going to be the TLB, but Akeda wanted more erratic and impressive bullet patterns, and the Big B sprite just caused too much slowdown and just couldn't be done. So he thought, okay, let's just simplify the boss sprite into something simple, which is just that weird rock orb thing, and then make the bullet patterns complex and interesting. So they essentially had to choose between the visual flair of the boss itself or the visual flair of the bullet patterns, and so that's why you get this kind of traditional design where the final stage boss is the most visually impressive looking one, like that mech thing I just fought, or the Big B in Dodonpachi. But then after that, the TLB is a more subtle, simple enemy with ridiculous patterns. So yeah, sorry I didn't clear this run. I know that's a little bit of disappointment. I'm going to get the clear, but I wanted to get this review out in a somewhat timely manner. And, I'd never really fought the TLB before, and it was close enough, I think. Not a big deal. So yeah, thanks for watching, thanks for tuning in. My overall thoughts are, if you are really serious about playing this game for score and really serious about playing it in its best possible format, you need to get a hold of the PC version, which I understand is a pain in the ass because you have to import it, and it doesn't seem to have any kind of digital release on PC right now, which is a shame, that, and hopefully something they fix, because like I said, I think shmups are a genre based around instant gratification, and so making just most of your players wait around to get the game. I mean, the super players and people really into the genre will wait, obviously, or just patient people, or people really invested in shmups. But the people who just kind of see this passing by, or maybe newer players, or people kind of getting into the genre at first, there's so many options ahead of them. Why would they wait around and spend more money to get the physical version? Which is, yeah, and this is too, I have to point this out. I'm not trying to be too hard on the physical release, because like I said, I can see where the ideas come from, and it's cool. I like the concept of just giving you a disc. I think that's really cool. That just works. No DRM or anything like that. I really appreciate that. But as far as, making it your only release, when I got it, it's simply just a DVD case with a DVD in it. There's no, extra manual or anything like that. Maybe there's some kind of special edition, but just the version I got, the baseline version, was just that. So I think offering both would just be really beneficial for the game. And now that it is available on the eShop, I think playing this thing in handheld mode is a lot of fun. It's a 16 by 9 shmup. The Switch has a 16 by 9 screen, so it's a really nice match. And I feel like, if I'm being 100% honest, Hori shmups, I can't talk right now, Hori shmups work a lot better on the Switch than vertical shmups. And I'll explain to you why. Yes, there's the flip grip, and I own that and use it. The problem is that the flip grip is not compatible with the Hori Joy-Con. If you're a shmup player, you need the Hori Joy-Con, because it actually has a decent D-pad. Now, there is a case mod you can do for the stock Joy-Con that you can use on the flip grip, which I have done. And it's alright, it's okay, but the stock Joy-Con was not made with a D-pad. It's essentially just 4 buttons. And so, yeah, the mod itself is not really that ideal, because you're still just hitting buttons. It doesn't have the pivot. It doesn't have the subtlety of a nicely designed D-pad. And that Hori Joy-Con D-pad is very well done. It's the same D-pad they use in the Fighting Commander. And it's a lot better than the crap you get on like the 3DS. It's not as good as the Vita, but it's a close second. So that's definitely the way to go. And you can use it with Rolling Gunner. So that's one reason why I play Rolling Gunner. That's one reason why I got Rolling Gunner for the Switch, is because I feel like it's a game that's actually well suited to the control scheme in handheld mode. And when you're in handheld mode, it's also less input latency than docked. So that's nice too. I almost wish there was a way you could play your Switch. I'm sure maybe guys should look into this. A way where you can hold your Switch in handheld mode, right? But then connect an HDMI cord through the USB-C port, so that you can use the Hori D-pad and the Joy-Cons connected in as a controller still, so you're cutting out that input lag of the dock, but you can still see it on a nicely large screen. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but really, if you think about it, I mean, is it that much more inconvenient than docking it? I don't know, maybe I am a little crazy, but that's something I'm actually going to look into as a kind of a solution for this issue. So thanks for tuning in. Hopefully that was informative or fun. Maybe a little both. See ya.